Hey, I'm Brittany Hall. I'm an attorney at Cape Fear Family Law, and I'm going to do a case law review today of Richter versus Richter. This is a case out of Iredell County, Judge Hedrick, and it's about life insurance proceeds from an ex-spouse. So you're married and your first marriage ended in divorce, and that spouse dies and leaves you a life insurance policy. Is that money separate when you divorce your second wife? It's an interesting question. The Court of Appeals and the trial court in Iredell County both said yes, those life insurance proceeds are separate. Here's why. The facts of Mr. and Mrs. Richter are: they were married for 5 years. Mr. Richter had a previous marriage that ended in divorce, and he had children with that wife. His ex-wife passed away from a terminal illness. It's very sad, and she left him a life insurance policy of about $500,000 and some change. He took that money, he put it into retirement accounts, and then he bought a house with it. After he bought the house, him and Mrs. Richter used some of their marital funds to make improvements on the house, which increased the value. When him and Mrs. Richter separated, Mrs. Richter, the new Mrs. Richter, wanted that money to be marital. She wanted half of it. I don't know if she thought that she was entitled to it because maybe they had made plans for it. Maybe she had spent some of her own money in anticipation she was going to get this money. The facts never really said. But Mr. Richter was like, no, this money's supposed to be for my kids. This was a gift from my ex-wife who had a terminal illness. So he fought for it and he won. The trial court said that it was a gift from his ex-spouse and that those retirement accounts were clearly separate, even though he had moved them around to a couple different retirement accounts. And they also said that the house was part marital, part separate. The separate part was the part that he put in from the life insurance proceeds. The marital part was the increase in value that came from the marital contributions from him and Mrs. Richter. Now, let's talk about what the law says. The law clearly says if you have a gift from anyone, from your ex-spouse, from your parents, from Joe down the street, if it's a gift to you and only you, then that is separate property when and if you get divorced, even if it was given to you during the marriage. So then how do we define gift? How do we determine if there is a gift? Well, there's something called donative intent, and the court can look at whether or not the donor had intent for that to be a gift to you, or whether they were getting something in return from it, whether it was a transaction, whether it was a contract between the two of you. So in this particular case, the court said we can determine that the first Mrs. Richter had donative intent. Here's why. She had a will and she made her ex-husband, Mr. Richter, the executor of her will. She also left everything to her children with Mr. Richter and made him the trustee of the children's trust. She also had a power of attorney and made Mr. Richter her power of attorney. And then she left everything to her children in her IRAs, her retirement accounts. She left her children as beneficiaries of those. So the court said it's pretty clear with all of the facts and circumstances surrounding her death that she intended for this to be a gift to him. The other thing they looked at was that particularly with life insurance proceeds, it matters if either the husband or wife, meaning Mr. Richter and the new Mrs. Richter, it matters if they were the owners of that policy on first Mrs. Richter's life, and they weren't. The first Mrs. Richter was the owner of her own life insurance policy. They had no control over it in that marriage. So that was very important. The other important thing was that Mr. and Mrs. Richter did not make any marital contributions to the premiums. They didn't pay the premiums. The first Mrs. Richter paid the premiums. So they didn't have a contribution to that policy. If they had done those things, like the court had in the Crago case that the Court of Appeals has already decided, where they did pay the premiums, then it would be marital. But they didn't. They didn't pay the premiums. They didn't own the policy. The other important thing is that there was no contractual relationship between Mr. Richter and his first wife. she wasn't obligated to have him as a beneficiary of her life insurance policy in a separation agreement or any other contract that they came up with together. She was doing it out of her own goodwill, because she wanted him to take care of her children, most likely. That's why she was doing it. Not because he had paid her some sort of consideration or there was other consideration in the separation agreement, which they didn't come right out and say it, but it sort of led me to believe that if she was obligated to leave him as beneficiary under a separation agreement, maybe that would create a marital interest with the proceeds. But they never really said that. So the important thing that we got out of this case was that life insurance proceeds are going to be separate unless there's a contractual relationship, unless one of the parties of the marriage owns the policy, and unless there are marital contributions to the premiums. And then the court can also always look at the donative intent of the donor. So if you get life insurance proceeds, they're most likely going to be separate. Now, the other thing to remember, they didn't say whether or not Mr. Richter titled the house jointly, or I'm assuming he titled it separately. The retirement accounts would have been only in his name because they were retirement accounts. But it is important not to commingle life insurance proceeds, because you can turn them from a separate gift into marital funds if you put them in a joint account, if you put the other spouse's name on the new house. So that the Court of Appeals didn't go into a lot of that, but I just want to make that very clear so that you don't think, oh, life insurance proceeds are separate. Let's go put something in both of our names. That can actually commingle the funds and change the classification of them from separate to marital. I hope this was helpful for you. If you do have any life insurance proceeds or you get any in the future, now you know what to do. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to our channel, and come back and see us again. Thanks.